Welcome to Define, the podcast about the moments that shape us. I'm your host, Maddie, life coach, yoga teacher, and curious soul. Each episode, I speak to someone about a defining moment in their life, the kind that flipped their world upside down, cracked them open, and led them on a journey they never expected. This isn't about headlines or hero stories. It's about real life, real shifts, and what it takes to rebuild after the break. So let's get into it. Hi, Cathy. Welcome to Define. How are you?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really good. Thank you. Looking forward to the bank holiday weekend that's coming up.
Thank you so much for being here today. We've been connected through a network of coaches, essentially. I'm really, really excited to have you because I think there's a lot of kind of parallels between the different kind of types of work that we do. So I'd love it if you can, in your own words, just to sort of introduce yourself and who you are and what it is that you do.
Of course, yeah. So I am a mind and body transformation coach. So I help people who've always struggled with their weight and body confidence to ditch the diet roller coaster by using simple mindset shifts. I work with them on nutrition and creating feel-good habits so they can feel amazing in their skin and at peace in their bodies. So alongside my coaching, I'm also a yoga teacher, which I've been doing for the past 8 years. I absolutely love it. And yeah, so I kind of work with everyone just to help them feel really good and happy, essentially.
Oh God, what beautiful work. Like, is there anything better? Is there anything better than that? I'm just super excited for this conversation today and really hope it's kind of this expansive conversation where we can just kind of explore a defining moment in your life. So I'm wondering if you'd be happy to share with us what that defining moment is.
Yeah, of course. So I've got a few. I'm going to start with the biggest, I guess, defining moment that happened when I was younger that I think paved a separate pathway for me that I never would have gone down unless this moment happened. So when I was 11, my parents sat me down at our kitchen table with my brother and sister and told me that we were going to move to France, which as an 11-year-old Irish girl who had been very sheltered up until that moment from in a small town, essentially, it was quite shocking and it was definitely out of the blue. And I think that was one of those moments that I can always remember. And it's really rare for me to be able to remember really clear details from that time of my life. But I remember just feeling really scared in that moment and kind of like, oh my God, what's this going to turn into? And then I don't really remember how long it was until we actually made the move. But when I was 12, then we moved to France around Halloween. It was such a crazy experience. And I look back at it now and I definitely am very grateful for that time in my life and for the opportunities that moving to France at a young age gave me. But it was definitely quite traumatic. And I went through different phases of kind of losing my identity a little bit. I couldn't speak French to begin with. And it took me a long time to adjust to the culture. We moved to a farm in France as well, in the rural countryside. So it was so different to anything I'd ever lived through before. Even though I was from the countryside in Ireland, it was still very different. So yeah, I guess that's kind of the beginning of my defining moment, was that move that I had to make when I was a young teenager.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing it. Just hearing you talk, like, and the way that you're describing it seems, really pivotal, this complete change of culture. And you talked about it being quite a surprising move. And before we kind of dive in, I've got like a million things I want to ask you about it. I wonder if we just take a step back and you share a little bit about, what life was like before. You talked about, growing up in Ireland in like a village. What was life like growing up there then?
Very normal, I would say. So even though I'm Irish, I'm not Catholic. So I went to a Protestant primary school, which is quite small. The Catholic schools tend to be a lot bigger, but I was literally, my class was 7 people. 6 girls, 1 boy. The boy was my cousin. And I come from quite a big Irish family. So I had a lot of cousins around me all the time, which I loved. We're quite a close family, even still. My mum worked in insurance. My dad worked on my granny's farm. So I was still kind of around the farm quite a lot and spent a lot of time growing up, running around the fields and that kind of thing. But yes, I mean, it was very normal. We went on holidays to Wales sometimes, but mostly to Western Ireland. It was when we started going further afield to holidays in France. I think we did 2 holidays in France before my parents decided to move there. So yeah, just a very normal, sheltered life, I would say. I rarely even went to Dublin, to be honest, and that's only like less than an hour on the train. My life was very much based around this small town.
Amazing. I'm getting that real strong sense of like community, you know. I love that there was only your poor cousin just being the one boy in the class. I hear, yeah, this really strong sense of community, this close-knit kind of unit that you had. You know, I would love to chat to your parents actually about where that shift came from, but maybe that's another conversation to be had. If you take us into that moment when you know, started to go on holiday to France and then your parents made this decision, what was going on then? Do you remember at all?
Yeah, I think there was like this strong need for my parents they just wanted more from life, I think. My dad's quite adventurous and very spontaneous. My mum, not so much. So I think he had to convince her quite a lot. But I think that kind of sense of adventure my dad passed on to me, which is why I've chosen this as my defining moment, because it did lead me on to do a lot more traveling then after that. It was like this whirlwind of a time that it was kind of this rush. They had to go and find a farm that they wanted to move into. And then it was like wrapping up our life. And I remember my mum and dad telling people that they were making the move, and people were like, oh, they'll be back within a year. Like nobody really believed them and thought it would work. And they're still there. And it's 21 years later and they're in the same farm that they moved to, retiring this year. But yeah, it's crazy. It all worked out so well for them. Even though there were a few tough years at the beginning, they've been very happy. And I was there for 10 years myself after the move. I left in my early 20s. So
I really feel that sense of adventure, you know, that going into the unknown, it's so bold. And so like hats off to your parents for making that move. And so I'm curious to hear, so you find out that you're moving to France, you know, you've gone from this quite sheltered lifestyle and suddenly you're thrown into a total different culture. How was that for you?
It was really, really tough, I have to say. I was really quite an insecure and shy child. I guess I feel like I just start to kind of come into myself a little bit and gain a little bit of confidence at that kind of 12-year phase in Ireland, in that community that I knew a lot of people. And then the move just kind of shook that quite a lot. I lost my voice essentially because I couldn't speak French and there were no English schools around where we moved to. So I was thrown into this school at 12. I remember the first day of school, actually, I was wearing, at the time, it was very on trend in Ireland to wear like red tracksuit bottoms called O'Neill's. So I was wearing my red tracksuit bottoms and I was wearing a bright blue zip up jumper. And all these French kids were just wearing really like monotone colored clothes. And I just stood out like a sore thumb. And I remember walking to school on the first day and just being surrounded by a bunch of kids and they're all trying to speak English at me. And I was the odd one out. I tried so hard for the first few years of being there to actually fit in. And I became ashamed of having an accent when I started to speak French, because I remember the first time, it took me a long time to actually speak French because I was so scared. But when I first said my few words, people started mocking me for having an accent. And then I tried so hard to get rid of that accent. And now when I speak French, I mean, it's probably come back a bit because I don't speak it as much. I managed to get rid of having that kind of foreign accent. Definitely a lot of trauma there around being the odd one out and standing out and not really having much of an identity, but just being the Irish girl that moved there and not really being able to shine through with my own personality. So yeah, school was really, really tough. And a lot of teachers almost picked on me they felt like I wasn't making an effort because I was so scared to speak. So they would give me a really hard time, be like, why aren't you speaking? I'm like, I can't speak, I'm so scared. That, I guess, has trickled through sometimes in my older life where I used to really struggle with public speaking. And sometimes I feel like my English isn't up to scratch because I spent so many years speaking French as my main language, but it's like this insecurity that I have. So yeah, it was definitely very defining in that sense.
I really feel that sounds challenging, finding a sense of identity. You go to one place. God, I really feel for younger you going into a school, you know, not speaking any of the language, having to navigate your way through different relationships with your peers, with your teachers, but then also coming back and then speaking English and then feeling like that's not necessarily how, you know, you feel up to scratch. I suppose I want to just take a moment to recognize that feels, you know, really challenging. And I'm not surprised that feels like a defining moment for you. My mind's buzzing with so many, so many different questions. I suppose quite a basic question of like, what was your experience of learning a language then? Like just going into a school and having to pick up a completely different language?
It's really funny because I don't think it's what you'd expect. So before we moved to France, we had someone come to our house in Ireland and they gave us very, very basic French lessons. So I thought going out there, I was like, oh, I can say like hello and thank you. But then going into school, even saying those words was terrifying because everyone was picking on every single thing I was saying. So I completely went into a shell. So instead of actually learning the language through lessons as you would in school, I started to absorb everything. Within about 6 months, I could kind of understand about 90% of what was happening around me, which was crazy because nobody was translating for me. I was just picking it up. I do remember in the beginning being quite paranoid, and if people were laughing around me, I assumed they were laughing at me because I couldn't understand what they were saying. But then luckily that kind of grew and I started to understand. And then I had a really tough time at school the first few years. And then that kind of, in a weird way, made me into a really strong student because I was threatened to be held back a year. And I was like, there's no way I'm going through this again for another year. So I worked really, really hard on my like written French and my literature. I just became really good at it. I kind of took everything on board and I actually excelled in school eventually. And the language, so basically in France, you have collège, which is kind of like your high school. And then when you're 15, you move into lycée, which is, I guess, kind of like your college here. And when I made that change, when I was 15 to the second school, I suddenly was speaking fluently. It just kind of happened. All the words were coming out of me because I'd been holding back for so long and I've been so scared. But I was around new people then and I was like, oh, this is my chance to speak, and without anybody knowing that I couldn't speak before. So yeah, kind of from me working really hard, I guess, the academic side of things, and then having the school change, I was just suddenly able to speak. And that made a huge difference to, I guess, my mental health as well, that I felt suddenly like I had a voice. I started to make friends. I wasn't always described as just the Irish girl, which is quite nice.
The brain is so incredible, isn't it? And like the way that you're able to absorb that information and then, you know, suddenly you're just fluent in a completely different language and have this whole new skill. It's really incredible. And you spoke a little bit earlier about this sense and maybe this theme throughout, you know, later years of not really finding your voice or struggling to speak up. So in school and then later on in like public speaking, where do you feel you're at with that? How have you moved through that feeling?
Yeah, it's funny because now I feel like public speaking is one of my best skills. I was saying this the other day, I was leading a meditation training for a company and I came out and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe how confident I feel, how at ease the words come to me now. When I remember at uni feeling really like physically sick before having to do a presentation because I was so terrified of speaking and being judged for speaking in a certain way, I guess, which comes from that first few years of moving to France. I think yoga has helped me so much with that, with the chakras and body awareness, but also having the confidence to speak to groups of people in public. And it definitely has helped me find the right words. I have done a lot of work on it. I think I have put myself out there in challenging situations. The move has helped me, and this is why it's one of my defining moments. It's helped me be comfortable out of my comfort zone. And it's something that I've kind of sought out in life a lot because from a young age, I was able to do that or had to do that, had no choice. So yeah, I've definitely worked on speaking. Sometimes I do like stumble over my words, or like I said a minute ago, a French word might come to me. But I mean, I know now that that's fine and it happens to everyone. I don't have to be scared of judgment.
I really love that sentiment. And also I think like, oh, it's just awesome to be able to speak 2 languages. So it's a superpower, if anything.
I mean, I wish I use the French more. I literally only speak French now when I'm in France with my parents, which is only a couple of times a year. People say that a lot and I'm like, oh, I should use it more. But in my life now, it doesn't really need to be used as much.
I'm wondering if you have to start running some French meditations, French yoga classes. Something you said really kind of struck with me then about one of the defining elements for you is it really pushed you out of your comfort zone. And I notice this theme when I speak to people of people who've been through experiences, particularly in their younger years, where they have been somewhat forced out of their comfort zones, grow up to be these really resilient adults and have, you talked about an appetite for adventure. So often an appetite for adventure, an appetite to push themselves. And that really resonates for me going through a number of different experiences when I was a teenager as well. I think it's just something that is so valuable for people actually, regardless of whether they went through that in younger years, of like the stepping out of your comfort zone is where that huge growth is. That just really, really resonated with me.
Yeah. And it's funny as well, because I feel like because I was out of my comfort zone for so long during those really early teenage years, that almost started to define me. And I felt that almost a sense of comfort being out of my comfort zone. So then when I actually left France, when I was, I think 22, when I left France, I spent the next 5 years constantly moving out of my comfort zone and traveling and going to different places and getting new jobs. And I didn't really settle for a long time. It's only been in the past 2 years now that I've actually kind of chosen my place that I want to stay. And I'm trying to feel comfortable in staying on one spot and almost unraveling that identity that I've kind of created for myself. That was interesting. It did become a massive part of me, just moving about. And it was almost like I was trying to find my home for a long time.
That's so interesting, that sense of finding grounding. That what's coming up for me, what I'm seeing is your home was sort of chosen, like as it is for most of us, by our parents, whether that's in the place we're born or, if in your case, moving to France, and then giving you this almost capacity and opening your horizons to like, oh, I can choose where I go. I don't have to move. I could move 10 minutes down the road, but I could also go and live in different countries and figure out really what it is and where it is I want to be. And earlier you mentioned that you had a number of defining moments and this was kind of paving the way. So I'm curious to hear, what do you feel that this paved the way for you too?
Yeah, so I guess the next big defining moment for me, if I give you a bit of a timeline, so I moved to France when I was 12 and then stayed there till I was 22. And then I went to Australia for a couple of years traveling, then moved into Southeast Asia where I started to travel as well. And I was moving around and I was kind of at that point, like I said, where I was looking for something to kind of ground me. And then I found yoga. That was a massive moment for me because I was also alongside this struggling a lot with my body. And I was not really looking after myself. And I had this kind of disconnect with my body as it being part of me, which is why I do a lot of the work that I do now around kind of body transformation and really guiding people to find a positive self-image of themselves. And then I found yoga, and I remember being in Thailand. I went to my very first yoga class because a friend dragged me along, and the class was completely in Thai and I didn't have a clue what was happening. I kind of stumbled through it feeling really clumsy, but at some part of me was like, this is amazing. There's something here that's making me feel a certain way that I've never really felt before. And I think it was that kind of reflection and feeling different things in my body and actually being aware of that. But then at the end of the class, this Thai teacher said in English, love your body, love yourself. And I remember being like, oh my God, I understand what she's saying. And she's saying it in English and that means something. Like, what is the meaning of loving yourself? It was just this, again, another really clear moment. I remember the room that I was in. I remember exactly what the class looked like. And I just fell in love with yoga from then. And I began this journey of self-love and self-discovery through the practice of yoga. From then, I completely switched up my nutrition. It was almost like something clicked in me where I was like, okay, now I need to start looking after myself. And that's when I fell in love with nutrition and food and actually healing my body and finding this connection with myself. I started to meditate. My mindset completely changed and I grew so much more confident in myself. And that's when I then went to India and did my yoga teacher training and stayed there for a while and kind of absorbed this philosophy of yoga and a different way of living that I now kind of lead my life through. And it's kind of interesting because I guess if I hadn't moved to France and had that mindset of exploring and looking for something else, if I'd stayed in Ireland, I would have probably been very happy, would have had a really lovely life, but I don't think I would have really found yoga in the same way or been able to go to India or had the confidence to go to India. Yeah, so I guess that was another kind of defining moment that led me in another path altogether again after that.
I think that's what I love about these conversations that I have is so often one defining moment leads us to a series of other defining moments. Just as you were describing that first yoga class, I felt this really strong parallel. I don't know if you've ever recognized this of, you going into France, not speaking the language, having to like pave your own way. And then you're suddenly in this class. You don't speak the language, but you're having to kind of figure it out for yourself and you still find your way in your own way. And I just saw that parallel. I felt like, oh, that's really powerful. Like you don't need it to be in English. It's so much more about you finding what it is and what it brings out within you.
I've never thought about that before, but I love that. It makes sense. It's almost like trying to muddle your way through something, again, being out of your comfort zone. And there's something so powerful about trying something new and actually being able to find a piece of yourself through that.
Yeah, really powerful. And I was really interested about you talking about how, yoga and all that came with that paved the way for you to have this transition of how you saw yourself. And I'm wondering if you'd be happy to share a little bit about what was going on for you before that. You talked a bit about a disconnect with your body.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that I have been really scared to talk about until recently. Actually, I've started to be a bit more vulnerable just because it was, I guess, such a vulnerable time for me. So I spent a lot of my time, as I've already said, kind of bouncing around traveling. But at the same time, I was just like partying a lot and I was overweight and kind of yo-yo dieting a lot of the time. So even from a young age, I was big in my body and I always felt this sense of being really uncomfortable and just like yucky. And I always felt so much of my brain was being used up by thinking about how I looked. And I thought people were looking at me and just seeing me in a certain way. So I had this really strong dislike towards my body that kind of translated into me just not really looking after myself. Like, what's the point kind of thing? Yeah, I guess I was really seeking a change. And I remember being in Thailand. So around the same time that I started going to this yoga class. And again, another really strong moment that I really remember. I remember exactly what I was wearing actually, where I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I just feel so uncomfortable. I just feel really big in my body and I want to just shed this weight. And it's almost like the weight was this unease, but it was obviously so much more than just my weight. It was things I was holding on to and like this belief that I had about myself, maybe about not being good enough. I don't really know what it was, but it was tied to a lot of things, I guess, that came from maybe moving to France. Yeah, it took me a long time. And it was that moment where I was like, okay, I need to change now. I need to like move my life in a different direction. And it's hard work. I mean, sometimes I still have thoughts that come up, but it's like this ongoing process of recognizing thoughts when they do come up and trying to separate yourself. And I guess that's when meditation with yoga as well came in to me. And I remember being in my yoga teacher training, my first one, and trying all the different meditations and having these really deep realizations about myself, which is why I always encourage everyone to try and meditate if they can, even if they think they can't, everyone can. So yeah, there was, I guess, a lot going on during that time that yoga really helped me figure out.
Gosh, and I just want to say, I'm really sorry that you experienced that. For many of us growing up at a certain time, we're both probably millennials and it's really difficult. Self-acceptance, body acceptance was really challenging when we had, and obviously I don't know exactly the narrative in France or where you were traveling, but certainly in the UK, there was this narrative of, like smaller is better. I have such vivid memories of like, the magazines that you could used to buy in the shops and they'd have like big circles around different body parts. And I just don't think that fostered a self-acceptance within young women and young men as well. I don't think that this, is exclusively to women, but I just see generations of women growing up who do struggle in their bodies. And I think as you've kind of so beautifully described, it's not about being smaller or looking a certain way. It's about that coming within yourself and nourishing and healing yourself. And then how that looks within your body is just how it looks. We're all different.
I was just going to say that's why a lot of the work I do today is about rejecting diet culture that you described, and that the narrative that so many of us grew up with is the pressure to look a certain way. But actually, how can you step away from that and find a way to live that suits yourself with growing confidence, but also, yeah, just finding a way of eating that's not restricting and not yo-yo dieting, and actually just build those habits to support having a healthy life.
I bet that's so powerful for the people that you work with. And I think that cannot be underestimated. Certainly, you know, we have younger generations who are growing up in a kind of different society, but that underlying diets, whether it looks like fasting now, whatever it looks like, whatever the latest thing is, it's still there. We still have the media, we still have society talking about kind of the way that we should or shouldn't be eating. I suppose thank you, because it's really powerful work. And I'm sure that the people you work with really, really benefit from that. We're talking, so you're in Thailand and we're talking, you've discovered yoga. What happens next to lead you on that journey? Where did you sort of start to think, oh, I want to become a teacher, like I want to share this passion?
Yeah, it's funny because I had almost not a bad relationship, but I started to get almost addicted to yoga at that point. And I was just like going all the time. And I was like, I need to know everything about this. I need to become an expert. And then someone said to me one day, they're like, why don't you just go and do a yoga teacher training course? And it was like, oh yeah, I can do this. But I don't know if I actually went to that course with the idea of becoming a yoga teacher. And I think a lot of people in the course at the time were the same. It was just kind of this introduction into more, because I think when you attend classes, and especially in Thailand, or actually I then moved on to live in Vietnam, when I was attending those classes, I didn't learn that much about anything other than the asana side of yoga, the physical practice. But I knew just from doing that there was so much more. I was just going to classes all the time. Like I'd sometimes go to 2 or 3 a day. I was like, I just wanted so much of it. So I went to India, which what I'm saying is probably was too much. But then when I went to India and I learned more, I was like, I found this connection with the reason. I kind of understood why then I wanted more. It was like, there's so much more to this practice than just moving your body. And then when I finished that course, so I did a month intensive 200-hour yoga teacher training in Rishikesh, which is, they say it's the birth of yoga. So I was there. And then at the end of the course, we had to teach our first class. And as everybody else, I was quite nervous. And I was like, oh, I want to make it really good. I remember teaching it. And again, it was another really vivid memory that I have. It was on the rooftop of our yoga shala, and the Himalayan mountains were in the background. And it was a really crisp morning with blue sky. I think there were about 10 people in the class that I was being marked on. Essentially, somebody was watching me to check how I was teaching and adjusting and all that kind of thing. And I just loved it. It's the same feeling that I still get now when I teach yoga. It was just like such a strong sense of alignment. Like, this is what I'm meant to be doing. I felt so comfortable and it came quite easily to me. At that moment, I was like, I need to teach yoga. I finished the course. At that moment in time, I'd kind of realized that I'd had lived enough of Southeast Asia. I'd been there for a few years and I wanted a bit of Western lifestyle. So I actually moved to the UK for the first time ever. My sister was living in London at the time, and I moved in with her and her boyfriend. Started to look for jobs in the UK. But I don't know if I've mentioned yet, but I was actually teaching English in Southeast Asia. That's why I was there. That's what I was doing as a job. Obviously, it's a bit more difficult to teach English in England. So I started looking for charity jobs because I knew that I didn't really want to work in a corporate sector. So very entry-level charity jobs. I actually got a job in fundraising at Cancer Research UK in Oxford. At this time, it was 2018. I moved to Oxford. Again, kind of out of my comfort zone, didn't know anybody there. So I found a shared house, moved in with 2 lovely people that I'm still friends with today. I reached out to loads of yoga schools. I was like, I need to teach yoga. I need to try. But obviously I was a brand new teacher, so it was a bit difficult to get a job. I know a bit more now, but even back then, yoga teaching was quite saturated. But this yoga school that I'm still really close with, Prana in Oxford, they were like, if you want to, you can come and teach for free and just practice your skills. So I spent 6 months, in my first 6 months living in Oxford, just like cycling everywhere to all these classes and teaching for free and just getting so much enjoyment from it that Prana eventually offered me a few classes on the schedule. So alongside my charity job, my 9 to 5, I was teaching on the side and loving it. yeah, I guess from there, it's now 8 years later. I'm still living in Oxfordshire. I went back to India a few times in Cambodia, but I'm now settled here and I'm teaching lots of classes and I built a bit of a community in my classes and I'm doing coaching alongside and still have a bit of work in the charity sector that I do because I did start to love that. But yeah, it's kind of led me to where I am now. Never would have thought that I'd be living in England and settling here, but I've got a house and I'm engaged. I've got a puppy. So fully settled. And yeah, I guess it's all thanks to yoga for keeping me grounded and having this sense of community around me.
Gosh, it's so beautiful just hearing you talk about your story and how it's kind of led you here. And I just feel, I think I used the word expansive at the start of our conversation. And I really do feel like you've led this really expansive life where you have just sort of continued to say yes. And I love that you were in Thailand, then you were in Vietnam, then you said yes to going to India. You gifted that to yourself, which enabled you to say, yes, I do want to be a yoga teacher, and learn that about yourself. Coming to London, saying yes to England, then yes to Oxfordshire. And I just feel this sense of like you navigating your way through with that expansiveness. It's really inspiring to hear. And I'm wondering how you feel both of these defining moments, or all of the, maybe there's, multiple defining moments, have shaped who you are today.
I think they've given me a really strong sense of intuition and alignment, because as you were speaking just now, kind of summing up what I said, I realized that I just kind of followed this feeling. Like I said about teaching yoga, it was that feeling in the class that I was like, this feels really aligned. I guess knowing more about yoga and knowing about the Dharma and the kind of maybe the purpose, what I'm meant to do in life. It was like that moment I found that. And then making my way to England, I was like, oh, my sister, I want to live with my sister for a while. And then Oxford kind of happened, but felt really, really good. I'm quite lucky in a way that if I ever feel like I'm in a situation that doesn't feel right for me, I'm quite quick at stepping away from it, which when I was working in the charity sector, someone might look at my CV and notice that I bounced around quite a lot, but that's because when something just didn't feel good anymore, I would then move on. And then that's kind of led me to moving away from that and making my own business and my coaching and helping people with that. So I guess it's just given me this almost practice of checking in with myself, seeing if it still feels good, if I'm living the right life for myself, and then like, how can I serve others as well? Because I feel like, so for some reason, I don't really know the reason why, and I'm always looking for the reason why behind everything, but I really feel like I'm meant to be serving others and making sure others are living the right lives for themselves and trying to get the best out of their life too, which is why I guess I really hate when people are held back by what they might feel like or what they might look like and having that negative self-image. So yeah, for some reason, it's led me to this place where I really want to help people live their best lives, which is probably why I started working in charity as well. It was that kind of sense of wanting to do more and to make a difference to people, but then feeling quite removed from that as well, because I was in the fundraising part of working in a charity. So yeah, I hope that's answered the question.
It's a real gift to yourself to be able to notice you feel like you want to be in service to others and then to dedicate yourself to that. I suppose for, you were talking about following your intuition, which I think is such a powerful thing, which so many people are disconnected from in modern day world or struggle to get in touch with or even kind of know what that sense is. I would just say for anyone listening, yoga and meditation and all these different modalities, finding one that suits you is so powerful in getting you in touch with that intuition. And it all counts. If you meditate for 2 minutes today, it counts. It's perfect. It's what you need in that time. So it's getting in touch with intuition is so, so powerful for helping you build a life that feels like, one that lights you up, one that you want to be in or excited by. And then I suppose I'm going to turn that question around and I'm interested to hear, is there anything that you needed to unlearn or let go of to become the person that you are today?
For me, there's like this idea of living a life that you almost are expected to. I guess coming from my small town in Ireland and seeing people obviously very happy, but living a life that they kind of knew was coming. Like my parents lived their life until they were in their 40s and then they decided to move to France. But there's something to unlearn, I think, especially that I had to do around expectation, what you kind of think is next. So I think a lot of people, especially to say millennials, there's kind of this way of living a life that you would assume that you would take, like a pathway. It's kind of your school, maybe finding your career, finding a partner, maybe getting married, maybe having kids, and then living your life and being very happy in that. But I think there's been a lot of pressure throughout my life and people questioning kind of, why am I not settling down and why am I not finding a partner, which I now have. But we met when I was 30, which for some people is a little bit later, especially coming from a town that I grew up in where people were kind of settling down a lot younger. And even in France, actually, it's quite normal to find your lifelong partner in your teenage years and get married to them. So when I was living this life and kind of bouncing around for a long time, there were a lot of questions popping up for me like, oh, should I be living this way? Like, is it normal? Is it okay? And I had to really allow myself to sit in that and be like, oh no, it's okay. Like, there's no set path for any life. Everyone lives a different way, and that's completely fine. If people are happy to live in that way and get married and settle down, that's absolutely fine. But I think I had to unlearn that it wasn't the right thing for me at the time. And then with that came when I did meet the person that I want to spend the rest of my life with. And I decided to stay in Oxfordshire and buy a house here and settle down and grow those roots. A lot came up for me where I was like, but I've unlearned this. Like, I really didn't want to live this kind of atypical life. During that transition, I went through a lot of anxiety and I was almost rejecting. I was like, no, I'm not meant to be settling down and doing this. And it was really scary because I had to really tune in to almost recognize the voices as being, you're feeling like this because you've now learned that you don't want this normal life, but actually because you're now choosing to have this life where you want to settle down and no longer travel anymore and get married. I was really questioning if that's what I really wanted. And it was almost like this battle inside of me where I was like, yes, I do want this. And that's okay to want this now, even though you've fought for so long to not want this. So that was a funny time that I really had to work through as well. And I spent a lot of time journaling, which I love. It's one of my favorite things that I do to help me just understand my thoughts. And then again, just check in with myself and know what I really wanted. And it was okay to have that change and change in identity, change in path, even though I was living a certain way for a long time. It comes with, I guess, Saturn returns as well. I'm now in my 30s. It often comes to a big shift in life at that point. Yeah, now I'm very happy. And I've built this business. I've built my yoga around a community and I have an amazing relationship, a house. I do feel very grounded and happy and a different sense of belonging, I guess, to what I've had before, which is really lovely.
The word that just so stood out to me then when you were speaking is the word choose. That just, for me, just seems like the key to it. And gosh, like everything you were saying, I felt like you were talking to my soul because I've so experienced many similar things, and it's no shade to anyone's path, because if you're choosing the right thing for you, then that's perfect. But I completely agree. I felt this expectation. I had a lot of friends who got married in their early 20s who were with partners they'd been through teens, and I felt very lost and a lot of expectation. And this is why I was so excited to talk to you, because I feel like, there are some real parallels between our journeys. And actually, it probably wasn't until I got into my 30s that I really started to reject that and recognize that the path that I am on is because I've made these conscious choices, and that choosing of building that life around you. And then if we all end up landing in a similar place, we all end up, living in the UK in houses or with partners, great. But also, if you then decide when you're in your 40s, 50s to go and live life differently, just as your parents did, rejecting that and going and saying, okay, I'm going to go start a farm in France, then as long as that is choice, there's that conscious decision, that's where the magic really happens.
And I just want to highlight as well that we are obviously very privileged to be able to have those choices. And I feel so lucky that I've been able to experience so many things and have the freedom to do that. Now, freedom is one of my core values that I live by. And it's why I've kind of paved this business for myself. But also as well, what you said about no shade to everybody. I'm always really worried about sharing my story and making it sound like I'm judging anybody for the life that they've chosen to live. And that's absolutely not the case. I'm so here for just people living their truth. And as long as they're aware of their choices that they're making, that's like the best thing for everybody. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that as well.
Thank you. And I think that's such an important point. Like, many of us are very privileged. And the fact that for us, like wealth in kind of, brackets, that freedom can be wealth, and being able to make choices can be wealth. And not everybody has that. But in the same way, the fact that you are dedicating yourself to be in service of others just demonstrates that you are utilizing that privilege in such a beautiful way.
I really hope that I'm able to encourage people to make those choices themselves as well through like teaching yoga and showing people how they can connect to their bodies. It's like, I hope that that comes across, that people are able to then kind of have that clarity and reflection to step back and view their lives in a way that they can then make those choices. So yeah, I really love how you've chosen out the word choice because it is so important.
I've really loved hearing your defining moments and this kind of thread that it's sewn throughout your life. And I've loved hearing, I can definitely feel that sense of adventure in you, following, you described it as following your truth. I can see that you're in this space where you are feeling super happy and able to be in service to others. And I'm wondering, as we kind of draw this conversation to a close, I ask this question to everyone, and I'm really excited to hear your answer. If you think back to that 12-year-old version of you on the cusp of that defining moment moving to France, what would you say, or what advice might you give to that version of yourself?
I mean, I wish I had somebody to say this to me at the time. It's that I feel like such a different person, it's so strange having that inner child when you can kind of almost picture yourself just being so, at that time, I was just so shy and lost and voiceless. I think I would just say like, everything's going to be okay. Just allow it to happen. If you're not able to be in control of any moments in life, just accept that and allow it to happen and know that there will be a time again that you can make your own path and find your way to where you need to be. It's trust, isn't it? Trust in the universe, trust in whatever's put in front of you. It's going to be the right thing for you. And it's going to all be okay.
Gosh, I just got goosebumps when you said that. I really felt like you were talking to that younger version of yourself. That's, really beautiful. And the word came up for me then when you were talking about like this trust, and the word surrender came up. Felt this real sense of like surrendering to the things that we cannot control.
So true. And that's funny because I use that word so much in my yoga classes when I'm teaching, like surrender to the pose. There might be all these thoughts and resistance coming up in your mind, but if you're just allowing yourself, just give yourself that space to just be and experience what's happening. And I feel like that opens up so many doors. And actually, I feel like I've kind of naturally taken on that advice myself because I believe so strongly that everything's going to work out, that it always does work out for me. I've been so lucky with things that have kind of appeared for me and all these opportunities within my coaching and my yoga that have come on my path. And I do really believe that that's because I trust and I surrender. And I know that if I have that confidence, things will appear. So I'm definitely a strong manifester.
I love that. Oh, we could do a whole nother hour on manifesting and trusting. And I wonder, for anyone listening, if you take something away from today, it's maybe to just pause and see where you might be able to trust or surrender into something that maybe is going on in your life just a little bit, or maybe to pause and just take a moment in meditation or in silence just to give yourself a little break from the monkey mind that we all generally live with in modern day. Thank you so much, Cathy, for coming on. I've really loved this conversation. I think I could probably talk to you for another few hours on on life. If anyone is interested in like your work or how to connect with you, what is the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, so they can find me on Instagram. I'm Wellbeing with Cathy. I also have a website, cathytalbotcoaching.co.uk. So you can find me there. Yeah, feel free to just drop me a DM for a chat. I'm happy to speak to anyone.
Oh, well, thank you. I've loved our conversation. Thanks everyone for listening. Speak to you soon. Thank you for listening to this episode of Define. I hope this story reminded you of your own strength, your own shifts, your own becoming. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and journey on.